The Canada-US trade relationship is teetering on the brink, and one wrong step could unleash an economic shockwave across both nations. Donald Trump is threatening a fresh wave of tariffs that could gut Canadian exports, destroy thousands of jobs, and rattle markets on both sides of the border. But just when it looked like Canada was running out of options, Mark Carney made a move that blindsided Washington. Could Canada really have found a way to outmaneuver Trump's hardline trade tactics? Is this the beginning of a new North American economic war? And most importantly, what does this mean for your job, your business, and your wallet in the months ahead? Stay with us, because we're about to unpack the strategy that could decide the future of Canada-US trade, the hidden cards Ottawa is holding, and the risks that no one in the mainstream media is talking about. Could Canada once again find itself in the crosshairs of Donald Trump's economic artillery? The warning signs are impossible to ignore. Trump's first presidency left a trail of economic bruises in Ottawa, from punishing steel and aluminum tariffs, to repeated threats of ripping up NAFTA, to a relentless America First campaign aimed at dragging manufacturing back to U.S. soil. Canada barely dodged a full-blown trade war last time by hammering out the USMCA, but even that deal left deep political and economic scars. Now, as Trump's political comeback seems increasingly possible, the mood in Ottawa is shifting from cautious optimism to full-scale preparation. Mark Carney, a figure respected on both Bay Street and Wall Street, isn't content to play defense. He's taking bold, calculated steps long before the first tariff threat hits the headlines. By forging new trade alliances across Europe, Asia, and the global South, and by setting up economic shock absorbers at home, Carney is positioning Canada to blunt the impact of U.S. pressure before it even begins. The strategy is simple but daring. Diversify markets, secure supply chains, and make sure that when the tariff hammer falls, it strikes a wall instead of an open wound. Why is Mark Carney daring to challenge the very foundation of Canada's economic identity? For decades, Ottawa's role was clear: be Washington's reliable sidekick, not its rival. Canada prospered by keeping the U.S. happy, accepting that our fortunes rose and fell with America's moods. But that very loyalty is now our Achilles heel. One stroke of a president's pen, one tariff decree, and billions vanish from Canadian industries overnight. Carney isn't just questioning this dependency, he's detonating it. His plan? Diversify like Canada's survival depends on it. Because it does. From locking in deeper trade deals with the EU, to supercharging Asia-Pacific ties under the CPTPP, to exploring new footholds in Africa, Carney is redrawing the map of Canada's future. And his message to Trump couldn't be clearer: if you slam the door, we'll walk through 5 others. It's a bold, calculated gamble. But is it enough to protect Canada from the next economic storm? And yeah, this part. Most mainstream media won't even touch it. If you're the kind of person who wants the full story, hit that subscribe button now. How can Canada turn Trump's own tariff strategy against him? This is where the political and economic chess match becomes fascinating. On the surface, Trump frames his tariffs as a patriotic shield for U.S. workers. But in reality, these measures often backfire, inflicting damage on American industries that quietly rely on Canadian imports. From auto plants in Michigan that depend on cross-border parts, to construction projects in Texas that require Canadian steel and lumber, the U.S. supply chain is more intertwined with Canada than most Americans realize. Canada isn't just a neighbor. It's a crucial supplier of critical raw materials, intermediate goods, and high-value manufactured products that the U.S. can't easily replace without driving up costs and risking job losses. Mark Carney knows this pressure point all too well. His strategy? Build up alternative markets and diversify Canada's trade so that Ottawa can call Trump's bluff, making tariffs too costly for Washington to sustain. The underlying message is simple. If America wants to play hardball, Canada can take its resources, products, and innovations elsewhere. But here's the challenge. Diversifying trade is no quick fix. Shifting supply chains, negotiating new trade pacts, and building the infrastructure to serve distant markets is a long, grinding process that takes years, not months. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. How far is Canada willing to go to defend its economic sovereignty if Trump's tariffs slam into full force? In Ottawa, the political rhetoric is no longer just background noise. It's turning into a battle cry. Mark Carney has been holding high-stakes meetings with business leaders, export councils, and provincial premiers, forging what could become one of the most unified trade defense strategies in decades. Behind closed doors, talks are centering on aggressive subsidies, targeted tax incentives, and new export financing programs to give Canadian goods an edge in foreign markets before U.S. tariffs bite. But the strategy isn't only about economics, it's about signaling strength. The plan is two-pronged. Fight in the legal arena, while making it clear to the White House that Canada will hit back hard if pushed. From energy exports to agricultural deals, every option is on the table. The message to Trump is simple. Canada is not a pawn in America's economic game, and if a tariff war comes, Ottawa is ready to make it costly for the U.S. too. By staying with us, you're already ahead of most who only skim headlines. This is where real understanding starts. Hit subscribe and stay informed where it matters. Why is Donald Trump doubling down on tariffs as a defining feature of his economic agenda? And why is Canada suddenly finding itself cast as a symbolic adversary? In Washington, Trump's inner circle is making it clear. Tariffs aren't just a trade tool, they're a campaign weapon. Advisors argue that decades of globalization have hollowed out U.S. manufacturing, leaving America dangerously reliant on foreign imports. The promise to bring jobs back home resonates deeply in industrial swing states, from Pennsylvania to Michigan, where factory closures still haunt voters' memories. To his supporters, the image of a tough, unapologetic leader standing up to Canada is more than political theater. It's proof of a president willing to fight for American workers, even at the cost of international friction. This is not just economic policy. It's a calculated political gamble. The showdown with Ottawa is shaping into a high-stakes game of economic chicken, where neither leader can afford to flinch. Both know that in politics and trade wars alike, the first to blink often loses more than just pride. They risk losing the future. What happens when North America's two biggest economies turn their trade weapons on each other? The fallout could hit far more than tariffs and trade deficits. If Trump and Carney dig in, the shockwaves could jolt everything, from Alberta's oil exports to Michigan's assembly lines. U.S. farmers could face punishing Canadian tariffs, while Canadian tech startups might see U.S. contracts vanish overnight. For everyday citizens, it could mean higher grocery bills, pricier cars, and fewer jobs. This isn't merely a skirmish between two political heavyweights. It's a high-stakes stress test for the entire Canada-U.S. economic relationship. The question now is whether the deep ties that have bound these two nations for over a century can survive the growing storm of nationalism, or whether this fight will rewrite the very rules of North American trade. Real insight, not headlines. Subscribe and don't get left behind. What makes this confrontation so unprecedented? It's that both Donald Trump and Mark Carney are fighting under the same banner of national strength, yet their definitions of it could not be more different. For Trump, America First means building walls, not just on the border, but around U.S. markets, shielding domestic industries from what he sees as unfair foreign competition. For Carney, Canada's path to strength is the opposite: building bridges, forging new alliances, securing diversified trade deals, and creating shock-proof economy that doesn't crumble if Washington slams the door. These aren't just competing strategies. They're colliding head-on, each backed by a leader willing to push hard and take risks. And here's the geopolitical twist. Both men are not only shaping the future of their own countries, but also rewriting the rules of North American trade itself. As the clock ticks toward possible tariff deadlines, the question isn't should Canada prepare, it's whether it can move fast enough to avoid being cornered. Carney's blueprint could make Canada more self-reliant than at any point in recent history, but speed is everything. If execution lags or Trump's tariffs land with greater force and less warning than expected, Canada could be left scrambling, not just to contain the damage, but to protect its economic identity. And in a trade fight, this personal hesitation could be Canada's most dangerous weakness. If you're still here, you're not just watching the news, you're decoding it. Hit that subscribe button and stay in the loop while others are left guessing. Are we witnessing the moment when Canada finally steps out of America's economic shadow? The days of quiet, predictable cooperation between Ottawa and Washington are fading fast, replaced by a high-stakes game of economic brinkmanship. In this new arena, the next few months will decide everything. Can Carney's bold strategy make Canada an economic powerhouse? Independent, resilient, and ready to shrug off U.S. tariffs? Or will Trump's hardline tariffs hit first, catching Canada mid-transition and shaking industries from steel plants to farms? This isn't just a trade dispute. It's a battle over national identity, economic survival, and who controls North America's future. So the question stands, will Carney's strategy be remembered as a masterstroke of foresight, or a risky gamble that left Canada exposed when it mattered most? And for both Americans and Canadians, one thing is undeniable. The future of this relationship will shape the prosperity, politics, and power dynamics of the entire continent for decades to come. Don't get blindsided by the next trade war. Hit subscribe now, because the future of Canada-US trade, your job, and your wallet depends on what happens next. Stay sharp, stay informed,